So today, we're going to dive into a manuscript that's, well, it's less like a finished book and more like a conversation that's still going on. It's this incredibly deep, poetic piece called The Unfinished Translation. And honestly, it really challenges you to rethink everything you thought you knew about history, survival, and what we all leave behind. The whole thing kicks off with this really haunting idea. What if nothing is ever truly lost? What if it's just waiting, waiting for us to finally learn how to read it? This just perfectly sets the stage for this whole journey into finding meaning in things that seem broken or incomplete. And really, at the heart of it all is this one question, a question the author says she's been circling for 30 years. The entire manuscript is basically her attempt to answer it. And not with some simple, easy definition, but by trying to translate the raw, messy, complicated experience of survival into a language we can actually start to understand. Okay, so our first section gets into this idea of inheritance. The argument here is that we don't just live in the present. We're actually like living, breathing archives, carrying forward all the history, the language, and even the silences of everyone who came before us. And this is where all these big ideas get grounded in a real single life. You can just see the progression, right? In 1929, she's a kid learning there's this split between what you say in public and what you know in private. By 53, she's in New York, trying to find her own voice. Then boom, 1968 happens, and that wall between her personal life and politics just shatters. And then finally, in 86, a single question from a student changes everything. Every moment is just another layer, building the foundation for this manuscript. And here's the crucial part. Carrying the past isn't some passive thing. It actually demands what the author calls unlearning. Now, this isn't about forgetting history. It's about actively questioning the stories we were all taught about power, about art, about whose stories matter, and finally seeing who and what has been left out of the picture. That leads us right to one of the most powerful themes in the whole manuscript. If we carry the past with us, where exactly do we carry it? Well, the answer is in our bodies. This section digs into how the body isn't just a personal thing, it's intensely political. This right here is the core concept. Politics isn't some abstract idea happening in government buildings far away. No, it's visceral. It's physical. The author argues that the body is the literal territory that power tries to map, to claim, to violate. And, most importantly, the place where it can be reclaimed. So, how in the world do you translate something as complicated as the body's truth? The manuscript gives a pretty surprising answer. Poetry. It completely reframes poetry not as some kind of luxury, but as a fundamental human technology. It's the only language, the author says, that's strong enough and flexible enough to hold life's biggest contradictions. I mean, just think about the difference for a second. The language of the state or the language of the market, it needs things to be simple, black and white. But poetry? Poetry thrives in those gray areas. It makes room for you to say two things that seem to contradict each other but are both true at the same time, which, let's be honest, is a lot closer to how we actually experience life. And this idea even shapes the way the author writes. She explains her shift to writing in fragments isn't a failure. It's actually a move toward more honesty. A fragment doesn't pretend to have all the answers. It just says, look, this is what I could salvage. This is what I could carry forward from the wreckage. So if our stories are made of these honest fragments, what does that mean for survival? Well, the manuscript argues that we have to completely redefine it. We have to move away from this myth of a single heroic act and get closer to the reality of survival as a daily, grounded, ongoing practice. It really boils down to three big shifts in how we think about it. First, survival is not heroic. It's not some grand movie plot. Second, it's daily. It's the small, repeated choice to just keep going. And third, and this might be the most important part, it is always, always collective, right? That whole myth of the lone survivor who pulls themselves up by their bootstraps, it's just that, a myth. As the manuscript puts it so beautifully, real survival is always supported by a network, a community, whether we see it or not. So if survival is collective, then what is our responsibility to the future? The final section of the manuscript pivots to exactly that idea. What is our legacy? What do we really leave behind? And this is such a huge shift. We're taught to think about legacy as, building a finished monument for people to admire. But what if it's not that at all? What if our real legacy is leaving behind a good set of tools for the next generation to build with? not giving them the answers, but giving them better questions to ask. The manuscript actually has a name for this: continuation. It's framed as a kind of debt that we, the living, owe to the dead. Not money, obviously, but a moral debt. It's our job to pick up their unfinished work, to learn from their struggles, and to refuse to let their defeats be the end of the story. I just love this imagery because it captures that idea of continuation so perfectly. It's not about preserving the past like it's in a museum. It's about carrying a fire from one person to the next, not just worshiping the ashes. It's about letting those past voices speak through us as we transform their work for our own time. And this brings everything full circle, right back to the title, The Unfinished Translation. What the manuscript reveals in the end is that the real act of translation isn't just about words and languages. The ultimate translation is taking up the incomplete, essential work of others and carrying it forward. And that's where it leaves us, not with a neat conclusion, but with a challenge. It's a reminder that the work is never really finished. The story is never totally complete. It turns the question, finally, back to us. The translation is unfinished, so what will you carry forward?